Hey everyone, it's Rob, and this week I'm going to analyze one of my favorite songs by one of my favorite artists, and that is Breaking the Habit by Linkin Park. This song has kind of a lot of meaning to me, it's very personal to me. It's essentially about the fight to overcome any kind of mental illness or addiction or anything like that, so there's kind of a lot of emotional weight behind the song, and in particular, when I was going through issues like that, like issues that I was having when I was younger, this song really made me feel like I wasn't alone, and it became my favorite song by Linkin Park. They obviously have a lot of songs that go through a lot of issues and stuff like that, but this one in particular is my favorite. So now that that's over, let's kind of quickly talk about what I'm going to be doing in this video. So I'm not going to be analyzing each like instrument individually or anything like that, or going through note by note and deeply dissecting like all the intervals or anything like that. That would take forever. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go over the main chord progression for the song. And then at the end, I'm going to try to make my own short piece, kind of inspired by that chord progression and kind of like what they do in the song. So, one thing to really mention here is the chord progression is very, very simple for the song. However, what kind of makes the song great is it's all these little simplistic patterns or melodies that work together really well. So it's everything, it's just the layering of all the different aspects of the song that really like make it stand out. And the sheet music that I downloaded isn't official or anything. So there was a couple things that I made changes on just because I didn't think it was quite correct. Really, it was just the breakdown of the song, which, if you know the song, what I'm going to call the breakdown is essentially after the second chorus, they there is like a 8 bar portion where it just keeps building more and more tension before the third chorus that really hits like slams it home, and that is what I'm going to call the breakdown. So I'll show that when I get there. There was specifically just some chords that, or not chords, but there were some notes in the sheet music that I downloaded that I thought were kind of weird and they didn't quite fit. So then I just slightly modified it because I thought the chord progression was a little off. But anyways, that's not a big deal. Um, and then I've also made some other modifications that I've written down on the sheet music itself to kind of explain like what I was doing and my thought process behind it. So it's just kind of like little mental notes when I go back through it and kind of explain what I did. So let's go ahead and jump into the sheet music. So here's the sheet music that I downloaded, and I added a couple comments to the top of this. I have the key and the chords, so that way I can recognize and kind of lay out what the chord progressions are going to be. And the key is definitely E minor. It could be G major because this is how you tell. One sharp indicates E minor or G major, but this is definitely a sad song, and G major actually is only played for a couple of chords throughout the entire piece, and there's a whole lot of E, so this is definitely E minor. I'll play the intro real quick, and you'll see what I mean when I say it takes a bunch of simple melodies, but then it just layers a bunch of stuff on it, and we'll listen to just the intro here, and then I'll get into the actual analysis. Okay, so that beat there and everything that you hear repeating, other than this string section here, this is supposed to be like Chester's vocals that it's mimicking. Um, Basically, this what you just heard is just repeated throughout the entire song, other than through like some of the chord shifts and stuff like that. And what's really happening is it's just layering all these different simple melodies on top of each other to create a really like cool sounding effect, and you don't actually really notice or get bored of the sound that's happening because of like the slight changes that will happen to these, or something like that. But overall it basically stays the same, and that's why analyzing this for the chord progression is going to be quite simple. So kind of looking at this, this is just this melody here, and again, this is down here as well, so this is the same exact thing up here. And we can see initially, I thought this could be E minor, C major, B minor, and then B minor again. Later on, we'll see why that isn't the case, because when we actually get to the chorus, we get the full chords of these, but when I initially took a look at this, I was like, oh, this sounds kind of, it's pretty straightforward. It's going from 1 to 6 to 5 and then back to 1. And but that's not actually the case at all. We can actually test why this isn't the case in just a second, but first I just want to show kind of what is really happening here. So essentially, it just does these notes for quite a while. So this just keeps playing and playing, and so you have the intro here, it keeps going. This is what I tested where I actually added the true chord progression here. So this is what the real chord progression is. It's not 1, 6, 5, 5, and then back to 1. It's actually E minor, so 1, C major, 6, and then it's E minor again, just 6/4 instead. So what this means is 6/4 is that instead of having E in the bass, you have the B from the chord in the bass. So it's E, G, and then B. So what you're hearing is you're just hearing this B just in the bass, but it's really still E minor. It's not changing the B to B here at all. And this is how we can test it, is if I add the notes here, and this, we just add these here. Oh no, this thing is, so this is an issue with MuseScore, where it wants to keep moving up to the next note. But anyways, so let's listen to this chord progression and then listen to the actual chord progression, and you'll hear a difference here. Okay, so that's with B. Now here's what the actual chord progression is. One more time. So you can tell that this B doesn't really, it seems weird when it's going with everything else in the song. If I just play not just the piano, but it sounds off, right? And so this is how we can tell that this isn't really B here. It's E. It's still E minor, just E minor 6/4. So that is how we can tell that and how you can actually test. So literally, if you don't know what a chord is or what the notes are, just try it and listen to it and see if it sounds wrong. So that's how I figure out a lot of stuff if I don't have all the information. And we can actually confirm this because in the chorus up here, it starts playing with those notes. So I didn't add, this is actually what is written down in the sheet music anyways. These are the full chords that are playing during the chorus. So from there, this was the dead giveaway to me, like, oh, that's not a B note that's playing back there. It's definitely a E minor 6/4. So overall, kind of recircling back to what I was originally trying to come up with for the chord progression. We have 1, 6, and then really 1. So, and then this just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating until we get to the chorus, and the chorus keeps repeating it until we get to this little part here where it builds a little bit of tension before it goes back into the main verse. So that sounds like this. Okay, I did add this E here because technically it doesn't actually play this in the song. It actually leaves it open and it doesn't resolve the note here from going from D to E. So it's just kind of left open and then it just continues playing this main melody here. Um, but yeah, so essentially the chorus, it just repeats that 1 6 1, and then it gets to just bounces back between C and D to build more tension. So essentially what I mean when it's building tension is E is our tonic or home base here, right? So this is what we our ears naturally drawn to, and this feels really comfortable. When you just keep bouncing back between C and D here, like you keep wanting to hear this note after these. And so it keeps building a little tension, and then it finally releases it here. That's what I mean when I say building tension. It's building up to playing this note here, or this chord. And then again, it just goes back to the main progression. So 1 6 1, or 1 6 1 6 4 1 6 4, and goes all the way up through that chorus again. Yeah, the chorus repeats again, and it has that building back up with C and D, which is right here. So it goes from C, D, and oh yeah, C, D, C, D. So this is where I'm talking about the breakdown. So this is the second chorus, and it builds up this tension. And instead of going straight back to the verse again, it has these bars which keep building even more tension. And that sounds like this. Let me just do it with just the piano. Okay, so that's the breakdown part, and this is the only part that's left to really analyze because after this part, it just goes back to the chorus again, where it's that 1 6 1 or 1 6 1 6 4. Um, and essentially what's happening here is we start with the E. So I guess technically it is kind of resolving from this uh, B here, but in my mind it doesn't because it just keeps getting like you can hear the notes raising up. So it goes like it you can hear it like ascending, and then it finally hits back to this A minor, which isn't really completely resolving anything, and until it gets back to here, and then it just keeps building more and more and more, and then we finally get back to the chorus. But for this chord progression, this is kind of where I had to modify some things because I think some of the notes here, particularly in the bass, were a little off. So it has just E minor, and then it has the diminished, the F sharp diminished chord, but it's essentially adding D. So normally F sharp diminished would be F sharp, A, and then C. Instead of the C, we are playing D, and it's in the bass. So really, this is F sharp sus4 or sus6, and then what is it, 6 4, where this D is in the bass. And it's the same thing with the G major. So here's the only G major in the entire piece, well, one of the two. These are just repeated. This chord progression is just repeated. So it's essentially you're going from 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, and then back to the chorus. So it just builds up all this tension and then releases it, and yeah, keeps going. So that is the chord progression for the song, and I don't have anything else in particular that I want to show. So now I'll actually just kind of show you guys what I had done and kind of explain what I did. Alright, so here's the piece that I wrote that is inspired by the chord progression and kind of more than just the chord progression, pretty much. but it's inspired heavily by Breaking the Habit. And essentially, what I'm doing here is I have this repeating piano piece, which is the equivalent of Breaking the Habit's little piano piece that it does in the intro, and that kind of sounds like this. I'll solo this for now just to kind of explain what's going on. I just have the bass line going here, so this is the exact same chord progression that Breaking the Habit has. So this is 1, 6, and then 1, 6, 4. And this goes all the way until we get to the chorus here, which is just 1, 6, and then 1, 6, 4 again. It just keeps repeating. And then this is where you have the building tension right before it would go into the verse here. But instead, what I'm doing is I'm just going straight into that breakdown that I was kind of talking about, and you'll kind of hear that in a second. But this is the exact same chord progression as Breaking the Habit uses. It's just in C minor this time. And then it goes back to the chorus, and then it ends. And then what else I have here is I have kind of a bass. I know it says cello, it's because initially I start with a cello, but then I move this into a bass. I just have kind of simulating almost like a bass guitar type of thing. Another harmony with the harp, and then I just have some strings that are going on top of it to kind of fill it out some more. And essentially, everything that I wrote is very simple. It's just when you layer everything together, it actually sounds kind of cool. So here's what it sounds like overall. Alright, so that was my analysis of Linkin Park's Breaking the Habit. Pretty simple chord-wise, but the song itself has a whole lot of meaning to me, and it's a very emotional song to me, but that's why I kind of wanted to analyze it and kind of see what was going on with it. And then, yeah, I hope you enjoyed my little piece that I wrote that was inspired by it. But if you like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.